economic and political power of the military, its impact on democracy. I'd like to thank, on your behalf, the team at the Democracy Forum for organising this event and for ensuring, as always, that you'll be presented with a very high standard of commentary and analysis. We extend our thanks to each member of the panel for participating, and in particular to Humphrey Hawksley for agreeing to chair this seminar. I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce Barry Gardiner MP, the Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade and for Climate Change, who's kindly agreed to serve as chairman of the Democracy Forum. And we're also very grateful to the management of the St James's Court Hotel for allowing us yet again to use this magnificent room. For those of you who regularly attend our events, the subject chosen for the discussion today will not come as too much as of a surprise. In the last 12 months, previous seminars have focused on Central and South Asia, covering such topics as state-sponsored terrorism, the suspension of democratic institutions, and the consequence of global power politics for fragile state structures. It's a sine qua non that the role of the military is a frequent and sometimes nefarious participant in this process. According to the Democracy Index, published by the Economist Intelligence Unit, none of the 4 countries selected for the seminar, Pakistan, Myanmar, Turkey and Egypt, scores more than 5 out of 10 in its 2017 international survey, which covers a wide variety of indicators, including pluralism, civil liberties and political culture. All are defined as either authoritarian or hybrid regimes. Three of the four recorded a lower score in 2017 than the average for the previous decade. Only Myanmar has achieved a score higher than its 10-year average, but it now seems to be heading on a downward slope. Undoubtedly, an important role of the Democracy Forum and its sister publication, Asian Affairs magazine, is to expose the negation of human rights and political freedoms. Our 4 nation states under discussion today all share some characteristics in common. Predominant, perhaps, is the oscillation between the authoritarian and hybrid forms of government that the Economist's Index reveals. For some countries, this state of affairs has become a trap from which it is difficult to escape. In her 1988 essay on freedom, Aung San Suu Kyi wrote, "As long as there are governments whose authority is founded on coercion rather than on the mandate of the people, and interest groups which place short-term profits above long-term peace and prosperity, concerted international action to protect and promote human rights will remain at best a partially realized struggle." Although it's a fairly straightforward task to expose the egregious nature of state coercion, as our panelists will undoubtedly explain, we have also to bear in mind the complexity of the issues involved and the convoluted route to statehood that our subject countries have taken. Each has experienced alternating periods of civilian and military rule. Often, military rule is justified as the only way to protect constitutional democracy. In his essay, Politics and the English Language, George Orwell reminds us that the defenders of every kind of regime claim that it is a democracy. The Pakistan-born historian Aisha Jalal suggests that, far from representing a real and sharp dichotomy, democracy and authoritarianism are reflective of ongoing struggles between dominance and restraint. They may frequently overlap. They are both antithetical and interdependent historical processes, coexisting in tension while at the same time informing and transforming the other. Well, from the comfort of this seminar room, it's perhaps difficult to envisage the circumstances that may justify military intervention in the democratic process. In the past 100 years, there have only been a handful of occasions when the army has been involved in supplanting or supporting civil measures on the British mainland in peacetime. In 1942, in the midst of World War II, George Orwell pinpointed the critical difference between fascism and democracy. Beyond a certain point, he wrote, military display is only possible in countries where the common people dare not laugh at the army. Samuel P. Huntington, whose Soldier and the State was published 60 years ago, but remains a seminal work, concluded that nations which develop a properly balanced pattern of civil-military relations have a great advantage in the search for security. But he warned, nations which fail to develop a balanced pattern of civil-military relations squander their resources and run uncalculated risks. Well, I leave our panel to determine exactly the damage that such an imbalance may infer, the risks that it entails, and the denial or delay of the democratic process that inevitably must follow.
I'm very delighted to be here. My name is Humphrey Hawksley. I'm a BBC correspondent and I've written a number of books on this topic. And just to carry on for 1 second from what Lord Bruce said, I've always been completely flummoxed how when we say Assad must go, or Saddam must go, or Putin must go, how we have failed to understand that if the military or the agencies of authoritarian rule are holding a society together, what comes in when it is unglued? And the institutions that we've built up here in Britain have taken centuries to make strong enough to hold an election whereby at the end of it, the people more or less trust the results. And if we just look at what happened with the Brexit referendum here, where there is a lot of mistrust, but there is still calm on the streets, just imagine what has been happening in Myanmar, in Egypt, in Iraq, and all those Western-sponsored transitions to democracy that are going through or have not worked. And that's why I feel particularly privileged to be here today, because of exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at Myanmar, where we heard the quote there from Aung San Suu Kyi just now, but she is practically stripped of all that haloed aura that she had before because of an ethnic dispute, which should have been predicted in the world. We'll be hearing more about that. We're looking at India and Pakistan, one a democracy, but not doing so well in the world of development compared to China, the other a military autocracy for many, many years, swinging backwards and forwards. And in that cusp of South Asia, that compared to East Asia is not doing that well at all. What has happened? Why are they still fighting a dispute that was 70 or 80 or 100 years old? Why haven't they been able to fix it? But first, we're going to start with Turkey. So we're going to have Turkey over here and the Myanmar army here in the first section of this panel. The panelists will speak for about 7 to 10 minutes, and then we'll do a transition to the other one, and then we will open the floor to the Q&A. There's a slight change in your program papers because Dr. Hamid Hussein is going to begin, really because Turkey is in a way pivotal to many things that are going on. One, it's big. Secondly, it's run an empire before in various degrees of success and brutality. Thirdly, it was and had been for many years that central linchpin that we thought would transition towards European-style democracy, and then possibly that would spill over into the Middle East, and that does not seem to be happening at all now. And the forces of authoritarian or military rule, and we'll hear the difference between them, are coming to play. And that will be Dr. Hamid Hussein, who I'll hand over to in just a second as he goes up to the, if you go. And Dr. David Bremer after that will be explaining to us, he holds a PhD in International Relations at the London School of Economics and is currently with the University of Surrey and has had first-hand experience in the conflict zones of which he's going to be telling us about. He's going to tell us how the Myanmar or Burmese army operates, which is something that we actually don't know a lot about. First of all, though, Turkey and Dr. Hamid Hussein. Thank you.
First of all, just for disclosure purposes, conflict of interest. I'm an independent analyst there, not affiliated with any organization. Only my travel to England being sponsored by the Democracy Forum that year. Apart from that, I have no financial interest to disclose that for this particular forum that year. So the second piece, which is important, is to where this information which I'm providing is just a brief, a minute or so to do with that year, so at least you understand both the strengths and the weaknesses of the perspective that is. My original kind of work was on the Kurdish issue, especially when the US invasion of Iraq occurred in 2003. So I've done a work on that part there, and that's how it drifted, as you know, is across the borders that did, and that's how Turkey came into play with that. So that maybe you can say an inherent, maybe a sympathetic bias towards Kurds because of my involvement with that there is. I was planning to, after the 2016 coup, a trip to Turkey that there is to get a more kind of in-depth analysis that there, but obviously as situation rapidly changed from a normal kind of post-coup push that there, it expanded to a quite wide area where even academics and the last time I heard was the barber who cut Mr. Fethullah Gulen's hair 26 years ago was also picked up that there is. So that's where my kind of the sources mainly is the Turks who are outside Turkey that there is. A wide group of people, the secularists, Islamists, Kurds, Alawis that there is. So at least he knows the limits of that in there. So where was Turkish army and where it is today that there is. So how Turkish army saw itself is I think the best explained by one of the Deputy Chief of General Staff of Turkish army, a former one there. He said is in Turkey we have a marriage between democracy and Islam. And the child of that marriage is secularism. Now that child gets sick off and on. Turkish army is the doctor. So when that child gets sick, that's the responsibility of the doctor to take care of that child. And depending on the severity of the illness, we administer the medication to make sure that the child recuperates. And this is, I think, so very nicely summarizes what the Turkish army has been since the kind of demise of Ottoman Empire and emergence of the modern kind of nation state there, where, and which Turkey, what you call the army nation. That's a good example of that there, where army is the guardian of the, what they call the Kemalist tradition that there is. So that role they have been, that there is, and to kind of direct control of the states there, which they commonly call coups there. Then there are other times is when they call it a coup by memorandum. You make a change there, but not directly take control of the state that there. And in 1997, when they forced the Islamist Necmettin Erbakan's government there is, which was called the postmodern coup that there is. So it's an army which has been well established that there, controls certain, this Kemalist secularism and the security of the state. Those decisions would be made by the army. And after the 1980 coup, the 1982 constitution, they legalized that power of the army that there is. So there was constitutional provisions that there, and through the National Security Council and Supreme Military Council that there, recommendation will come from the army that they are not subject to discussion or revision that their civilian government is supposed to implement those without any amendments to that there is. And a serving Lieutenant General is the Secretary General of the Supreme Military Council that there, who makes sure that that's the monitoring system that there to make sure the civilians are following what the prescription was given by the doctor that there is. And this has been going on until we come to 2002. So in 1997, they resulted in removal of the Islamist party that year. Later it was banned that year. So the Islamists learned that, well, we need to take over the system that year, we need to change our game plan. And that's how the Erdogan and AKP party, the Justice and Development Party, came in that year. So in the 2002 elections, when they win that year, he knows that because there's an entrenched system in place, that even if you have the win the election that day, you cannot make any dramatic changes that day, because these instruments which are in there is, unless you have a control of those instruments, you can't make any change that day. So first few years, he lays low, concentrates on to make his tent bigger, So more people coming into that there where he can confront the military that there and concentrate on the economic development there, so he have that legitimacy on both ends that there is. So that part he does that, and then after that, when he feels comfortable enough there is, so now he starts moving to take control of those levers of power, because that will help you to understand that there where we are now today that is. So first he starts with to the civilian intelligence agency MIT. He needs to have control of that. Yes. So he puts in his close confidant there, and you start now moving the military personnel, which is in the civilian intelligence agency, you start a little bit pushing them back that there, so the civilians get more impact that yes. Second step he does is he creates a new telecommunications directorate there in 2006. So all the civilian intelligence agencies' eavesdropping capabilities, your paramilitary forces, your police, and MIT is put under one tent back there. And that is his communication minister he put in Binali Yildirim, who's now the prime minister of that. Yes. Should do that part. Second is the signal intelligence is divided between military and the MIT. So then they make a rule change there to make the military signal intelligence subordinate to the MIT that there. So he covers that part. Yeah. The second part is always is military when it's ruling when it's not actively controlling the state, it needs to have a civilian partners that. And the two main partners in Turkey are the judiciary, the traditional old secular guard that there. So they have a constitutional code which resulted in many kind of clashes between civilians and the military that there is. And then you have the judiciary and the civilian bureaucracy, police in those areas, prosecutors, things which keeps everybody in check that there is. Here he made an alliance with the Erdogan's power base is from conservative, religious, Islamist, lower middle class, bazaar, which we call that their group. He does not have professionals to have run the government that is. So that's the alliance with the Fethullah Gulen's movement called the Hizmet that there, which you can do depending on who you talk to that there. It's an educational foundation, a philanthropist organization, a business guild, a secret society. You put all of them together, that's an organization. You know. So highly professional, successful in their fields that there. And that alliance allowed for the Gulenists that there to penetrate the judiciary, prosecution, civilian bureaucracy, especially police that there is. So when that influence is achieved that there, so now they started trying to clip the wings of TSK that there, which is the Turkish initial for the Turkish army that there is. So it starts with the first thing is, and then he does and there's a clash going on. I've given one example that year. So in 2007, Erdogan's close confidant and foreign minister, deputy prime minister, Mr. Abdullah Gül. So he's planning to elevate him to the seat of president that year. Military puts a statement online with a pretty obvious threat, not naming him that year, that if he's being selected, we are going to, may have to come in and take over. And the reason for that is because Mr. Gül's wife wears the headscarf that year. And in many incidents where even the serving lieutenant generals refused to attend the meeting where the deputy prime minister is present that year. The Erdogan response is by calling a snap election that year. Wins with a much bigger majority that year, puts in the constitutional reforms that year, and that's now the place is where he starts cutting in there. The first step is that the military officials can be tried in a civilian court. Then he moves in that there is because there are the big media houses of both the pro-Erdogan and the Gulen that there start kind of leaking all this information about the alleged and some whatever disgruntling going on in the army that there and the possible alleged coups that there which the military is planning that there. So now they first go after the retired officer, senior. So the judiciary prosecution starts bringing them back for there's an allegation of that, their media leaks come in, retired officers start getting arrested that year, followed by the serving officer that year. So that's how it is, and the two most famous cases were in 2007, it's called the Ergenekon conspiracy there, where the government alleged that the group of army officers, journalists, and opposition members are planning to take over the government that year. And then in 2002, which was 2010, was a more serious allegation called the Balyoz sledgehammer conspiracy there, which they alleged that in 2003, military brasses decided to launch a coup and take over that years. Using those powers there is they start putting in dock, not only retired, but the serving officers that there is. Next step he does is to the serving officers who are charged and are arrested, they're in a military prison, Hasdal. So he changes the law that there is and help them to force in a biased meeting now as the clash going on there is to able to force them to have these people who are under investigation retired. Because he feels threatened that as long as they are in the military prison, under the military control, that there's a chance a reaction can come in that there. Force them to retire. Once they are retired, they're transferred from the Hasdal military prison to Silbury civilian prison that there is. So this dynamic's going on that there. So the military brass is in retreat is because he has a legitimacy. He has made alliance with the opposition party that their economy is doing great. International area, which was mentioned that there earlier, is to the whole Middle East in flames. Is and in both the Obama administration is in Europe where there was still some reservation there, but Obama administration they found the eureka. Well, the whole Middle East is on fire that there is, and that's a moderate Muslim country which has traditional relationship with West that they're a member of NATO that year, which has a democracy now that year, and elections are being done with that year. So that was internationally kind of more favorable for the Erdogan that year. The environment was perfectly set. That's the classic example for the Muslim world that year all over that year. This model should be there. And that's how the pressure from Washington came on the Europeans that year to speed up this the EU kind of negotiation process that year. So he has now covered domestic, international kind of area. He's lucky enough there that that time he doesn't have any major conflict in his neighboring country. He's not poking his finger in everybody's eyes at that time period that year. So this is the situation which comes with that part there is. And the result is that in 2011 is the snap came in where an unprecedented way is the chief of the general staff and the heads of Air Force, Army, and Navy's four senior-most officers who were dictating the nation's destiny that year. In July, they all resigned. That resulted in plummeting of morale in the Turkish army that year, because junior officers now saw that they have no protection that year. That the senior, for whatever reasons, the situation have changed, and your own people are not able to kind of protect you with that part there. And this is what the seeds of the 2016 July coup were sown at that time period when the second and third tier leadership in the army said that the time is running out that years. Because what happens is in August, the Supreme Military Council meeting occurs where all the major decisions of promotions, postings kind of going out there. But remember at this time there are almost 500 serving and retired officers who are behind bars that year, which is occurring that year. So this is which is the kind of sets the stage for now the potential coup. I'm not going to go into details of the coup that there is. So it's the second and third tier kind of leadership there launches an ill-prepared coup that there is, which fails that part, and now is the whole scenario changes that there. And what opportunity got Mr. Erdogan in his own words is that, referring to the coup attempt, this uprising has been a gift of God to us, because this will be the reason that we will cleanse our army. And from that day onwards several hundred officers of all ranks were kind of arrested, prosecuted, things like that. Now the situation is in the immediate aftermath of that, just to give you an example, that there is between 40 to 45% of the senior brass. These are the brigadier general and up all officers. They are either sacked or they're behind bars now there. Then you went from the middle order that year, which is your colonel level, which runs the army that year. So 586 colonels were removed. And then there's several hundred non-commissioned officers. So all layers he cleansed up that year. He closed all military colleges and military academies, as dominant militaries have their own channel of that there, that part there. And that is where which I call the First Republic, demise of the First Republic that year, which the Kemal Atatürk made. And now we are seeing the Second Republic there, where Erdogan, who has the dreams of being the neo-sultan that year. And that resulted in all his domestic authoritarianism, as well as his kind of forays into all the snake pits in the neighborhood that there, which has occurred that there is. So this is the background which comes in, and today, in the summer of 2016, what happened is, it's exactly what happened in the summer of 1826, when the core, the elite of the Ottoman Empire, Janissaries, who have conquered these lands, became a hereditary kind of aristocracy there, jealous of their perks and privileges that. So any sultan who would disagree with that would be either not allowed to rule, or in many cases deposed or even killed that there is. And in 1826, when Sultan Mahmud II tried to stop that, there was an open rebellion, and that resulted in the demise of Janissaries, where he crushed the rebellions, killed, exiled a number of them that year, out of that year, and says that was the end of the Ottoman Empire that year. So now I'll just stop here, and then I'll be more than happy to answer any questions after that. Yeah. Thank you very much.